ஆமாம்.
A very good evening to all of you. Welcome to the 9th edition of Frame of Mind, and the first one that we are going virtual. So for people who are joining us for the first time, I'm Dr. Mangala. I'm with Schizophrenia Research Foundation, which is a 35-year-old non-governmental organization operating out of Chennai. Can we have the AV on scarf, please?
A group of committed mental health professionals led by Dr. Sharada Menon got together in 1984 to set up the Schizophrenia Research Foundation, or SCARF, in Chennai.
These people were left without any impetus, any motivation, anything, useless for themselves and the family. So that means they had to be taken back to their pre-morbid level of functioning, which meant rehabilitation.
After 12 years of working out of rented properties, we received land in Western Nanagar as a donation from the Tamil Nadu government. In 1997, using contributions from the public, we built our mental health center on this land. Presently, outpatient treatment at our mental health center in Nanagar caters to over 100 patients a day. Detailed assessments are followed by medication and counseling. SCARF also provides the families or caregivers information about how to best manage the illness. A systematic plan for the person's rehabilitation is then devised. At our daycare center, an average of 80 men and women spend their time doing various tasks. SCARF's activities now extend beyond the walls of our centers. We have established a network of community outreach programs in Tamil Nadu. Family education programs are regularly conducted to help families of those with the illness to understand better and cope with it. Research has not taken a backseat. SCARF has been a collaborative center for research and training of the World Health Organization (WHO) since 1992. We believe that early and regular treatment, along with family and community support, can enable them to lead productive and fulfilling lives. Changing negative mindsets and misconceptions is an arduous process, and it begins with each one of us. Join our campaign to give people coping with schizophrenia a chance to live a better life.
So that was a very brief AV on SCARF, and we have come a long way from 1984, and we still have a lot of work that we have to do, and we have our responsibilities charted out by Dr. Sharada Menon, our founder. Frame of Mind is one of the major awareness initiatives of SCARF, which we have been doing since 2006 onwards, and this is the 9th edition. So just for you to understand what we have done in all these previous editions, let us have a quick AV on Frame of Mind, please. Normally, what we do in Frame of Mind is we have usually a 3-day festival where we screen about 9 films from across the globe in various languages, which deal with mental health issues in a very positive way. And following each film screening, we normally have a panel discussion where you have a mental health professional and a media professional discussing the movie, both about the filmy aspects of the movie and also about the mental health that is being depicted in that film. So the panel discussions that usually happen after each film have evolved over the years, and we have definitely seen quite a lot of change in the way people interact with the panelists, from a time when people were very, very wary of even talking about mental health issues. We have people who come forward and discuss their personal mental health problems in front of a group, and that was a major step forward. You know, that is our aim, to work on the stigma and the discrimination that keeps people under the carpet most of the time. So with that, I would like to invite Dr. Padmavati, Director of SCAR, to welcome the gathering.
Good evening to all of you. I trust all of you are safe in the midst of this unprecedented human disaster that we have seen in the year 2020. The pandemic has been a kind of a routine changer globally, and we have necessarily been forced to change the ways in which we communicate. I take great pleasure in welcoming all of you to this 9th edition of Frame of Mind by SCAR. As you've already seen in the introductory video, we've made long strides in the ways in which we have integrated films in mental health communication. And this year brings in a change. We are meeting on a virtual platform, delightfully nevertheless. It gives me great pleasure to invite all of you to participate in this 2-day film festival. As Mangala had said, we used to screen films and then talk about it earlier. But for now, we are trying to make it more interactive with a panel discussion that's going to be on today and tomorrow. And that would, I'm hoping, give us a lot more insights into how to use this virtual medium to communicate mental health. As is our mandate each year, as Mangala has already said, we invite short films on the theme of, this year it's on the theme of coping with the new normal, as is very contemporary. 100 films and 2 rounds of jury, a very tough job indeed. However, I think the jury has really come in, extremely enthused about the entire, bunch of entries that have come in. I welcome the pre-jury members and the final jury. The final jury is chaired by Dr. Michelle Weiss, a cultural psychiatrist, a medical anthropologist, a health social science researcher, a person with tremendous interests in cinema, particularly the Indian cinema and films. I think more importantly, he's an old friend of SCAR. And I think he stood by us through all our film festivals and really mandated the way in which we communicate mental health. Welcome to you, sir. And many thanks for being with us. The other members of the jury, Harsha Koda. Harsha actually spearheaded all our initial film festivals. We have Lakshmi Ramakrishnan, the winner of our 2010 festival, with her short film on the radio. She herself is a very intense filmmaker. Raju Murugan is a writer, a journalist turned filmmaker from Tiruvallur, and Vinodini Vaidyanathan, a film and theatre actor, playwright and theatre director. I welcome you all and thank you for the tremendous support that you have given us. As Mangala said, all the shortlisted films will be screened over the next 2 days. The prizes will, however, be declared only tomorrow. And I welcome all the short film makers to this festival, and I noticed that there are a number of them sitting in the participant groups. The 2 days of discussion aims to be very insightful, and there's a very esteemed panel of discussants that will be holding forth the 2 days. Today's session will bring to the forefront the trials of caring for a person with dementia. The filmmaker Lakshmi Ramakrishnan has made a very honest attempt to portray reality as is, and the discussion aims to bring to light the possible solutions in the process of caring for a person with dementia. The panelists include Dr. Mitchell Weiss, Lakshmi herself, Lakshmi Ramakrishnan, Dr. Sridhar Vaidiswaran, who is psychiatrist from SCARF and an old age specialist. He runs the dementia care services at SCARF, and Gomati Radhakrishnan, a caregiver who has taken care of her mother-in-law through difficult times. I welcome all the panelists of today. Tomorrow's discussion, however, explores the portrayal of mental health professionals in the recent day cinema, especially in the regional films. More about that tomorrow. Of course, all of you virtual participants makes this film festival a huge success by your presence. I welcome you all and wish you have a great 2 days of this festival. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Padma. Before we move on to the panel discussion, we thought we should have screening of some of the short films that we have shortlisted and wanted to be seen by all of you. And even before we move into that, we would like to screen one film titled Defecate. This was one of the entries. We received about 100 entries, and this was one of the entries that we received during the festive for this contest. But then it could not be shortlisted for the jury viewing simply because it was longer than 5 minutes. But however, we thought it was a wonderful way to pay tribute to the COVID warriors. And this is SCARF's tribute to the COVID warriors. Let us watch Defecate now.
Salut toi, ça va?
Ça va. Un peu crevé à cause du taf, mais ça va.
Il est tout pixelisé mon amoureux. Tu sais quoi? T'es beau. J'ai très envie de toi, là, maintenant.
Il va falloir t'attendre, comme tout le monde, après le confinement.
Ah, parce qu'après le confinement, tout le monde va venir te baiser?
C'est con.
Tu me manques.
Toi aussi.
Mais pourquoi je peux pas venir dormir chez toi? Ça sera plus simple.
Non. Je préfère pas, je le sens pas. Puis avec toutes les merdes que je risque d'attraper au boulot, je veux pas t'exposer.
Chut, t'es chiant.
Ce soir, j'ai croisé ton père en bas de chez moi.
Oh bah putain, c'est pas juste. En fait, faudrait que j'aille confiner chez mon père pour pouvoir te voir tous les jours, quoi.
T'avais qu'à dire oui quand je t'ai proposé qu'on vive ensemble.
Ouais.
En tout cas, il détourne toujours le regard quand il me croise.
Non mais laisse tomber, c'est un con.
Bon, t'as fait quoi ce soir?
Ben, il y a 1 heure, j'étais en train d'applaudir sur mon balcon.
T'as fait ça quoi?
Bah ouais, écoute, c'était marrant. C'est pour les soutenir?
Ouais. C'est de façade tout ça.
Comment ça de façade?
Bah, ça saurait si depuis 10 ans, on voulait aider ceux qui travaillent dans les hostos.
Oui, c'est sûr, mais là c'est pour les remercier, tu vois.
Ouais.
Ça va?
Non, mais là, je suis crevé, là, il faut que j'aille me coucher.
Ok. me fais signe quand tu passes avec ton beau camion dans ma rue?
Il pue, mon camion.
Listen to my voice, my words into your ears, deeply inside of you, sound like a poem. I should have listened to you. I should have listened to you.
Salut, c'est Max, laissez-moi un message.
Ouais, c'est moi. Bah, tu me rappelles? Allez, je t'embrasse. Rappelle-moi. Rappelle. Bon, bah là, définitivement, tu me fais la gueule, je sais pas pourquoi. Rappelle-moi. Apparemment, j'ai avalé un pangolin. Max, quand tu veux pour rappeler ton amoureux, merci. Je vais me coucher. Je sais pas, il décroche plus depuis 3 jours.
Vous vous êtes pris la tête?
Même pas? Hein?
Bah tant pis, va le voir.
Ah non, mais non, si je fais ça, il me tue, il aura raison en plus.
Non, Antoine, tu refermes le tiroir avec les médicaments, tu touches pas à ça. Monsieur s'est trouvé une nouvelle vocation.
Médecin?
Ah non, il veut être caissier. Il a seulement 8 ans, mais il est en boucle, il veut être caissier dans un supermarché.
Ça lui vient d'où?
Une émission à la télé. C'était sur les gens qui ont pas trop le choix, quoi, qui sont bien obligés d'aller bosser en ce moment. Des boulots de merde.
Ouais.
Enfin, je voulais pas dire boulot de merde. Excuse-moi. Ça doit pas être facile pour ton âme en ce moment.
Je te rappelle, ok? Je suis désolé, mon cœur. Je suis désolé. J'avais bien vu que je t'avais blessé pour quelque chose, mais je n'arrivais pas à comprendre pourquoi. Et bah là, j'ai compris. Enfin, je crois. Rappelle-moi. Papa, retire ta main là, papa, je te vois pas. Oui, voilà. Ça va?
Ça va? Dis donc, ça fait un bac que tu m'as pas téléphoné, toi.
Oui, je sais. Écoute, je t'appelle parce que je voudrais te demander un service à propos de Max. Non, papa, arrête, s'il te plaît. Je sais pas quel est ton problème avec lui, si c'est parce que c'est un homme, ou si c'est à cause de son taf, je sais pas, ou les deux peut-être.
Ça n'a rien à voir.
Bah si, un peu quand même, non? Je sais pas, tu crois pas que par les temps qui courent, là, en ce moment... Pardon. Écoute, tu crois pas qu'on pourrait redémarrer de zéro? Que je puisse te demander un truc? Parce que j'ai besoin de te demander un truc.
Ok. Dis-moi.
T'as toujours le projecteur?
Oui?
Tu vois le mur qui est en face de ta cuisine?
Oui? La façade?
Ouais, la façade. Je vais t'envoyer quelque chose et je voudrais que tu sois prêt pour 20 h.
Ok. D'accord.
Merci.
Bien sûr que c'est formidable ce que fait le corps médical. J'ai juste eu l'impression que derrière tes beaux discours, qui sont des beaux discours, hein, bah, derrière ça, tu faisais pas vraiment attention à moi.
Pourquoi t'as décroché cette fois?
S'il y a une chose d'impardonnable, c'est de ne pas pardonner. Romain Gary.
Tu m'épates. Je voudrais te demander pardon et...
N'en jetez plus, s'il vous plaît, n'en jetez plus.
Et j'aurais te demander de venir t'installer avec moi.
Ah, 20 h. Ils applaudissent ta proposition. Tu peux y aller aussi si tu veux.
Ah non. Pas pour moi. pour toi.
That was a tribute to all the unsung heroes of COVID-19. They will now start screening the first few films of the contest entries. I would suggest that all of you can write your comments in the comments box, in the chat box, about what you think about the movies. It would be definitely encouraging for the people who made those films. Can we have the films, please?
बरसों बिता ही विदेश, बरसों बिताई विदेश, बुलाए हर बिटिया को बाबू, जाऊंगी मैं अपने देश, मैं अपने देश। कैसे मैं आऊँ रे देश, बता दे रे बाबुल मोरे, कैसे मैं आऊँ रे देश। पेड़ों की डाली पे सखियां चढ़ी है, अम्बुआ के रसवा की लागी झड़ी है, और मैं बंधी परदेस। बता दे रे बाबुल मोरे, कैसे मैं आऊँ रे देश। जेठ के महीने में धान रोपाती, महुआ के फूलों की धार बनाती, पर मैं बंधी परदेस। बता दे रे बाबुल मोरे, कैसे मैं आऊँ रे देश। जंगल की लकड़ी से चूल्हा जलाती, दाल भात तरकारी पकाती, पर मैं बंधी परदेस। बता दे रे बाबुल मोरे, कैसे मैं आऊँ रे देश। माई की गोदी का करके बिछौना, तारों की झुरमुट में मुझको था सोना, क्यों मैं बंधी परदेस। बता दे रे बाबुल मोरे, कैसे मैं आऊँ रे देश। आसार की बारिश में मिलके नहाते, धान के खेतों में हल हम चलाते, पर मैं बंधी परदेस। बता दे रे बाबुल मोरे, कैसे मैं आऊँ रे देश। गाँव के सपने धरे रह गए हैं, आने के साधन खड़े रह गए हैं, हूँ मैं बंधी परदेस। बता दे रे बाबुल मोरे, कैसे मैं आऊँ रे देश। जाने कहाँ से कोरोना है आई, अब पहले उसकी करूँ मैं बिदाई, फिर छोड़ू परदेस। बताऊँ मैं बाबुल तोहे, फिर लौटूंगी देश। बताओ मैं बाबुल तोहे, फिर लौटूंगी देश।
హలో కార్తీక్.
சொல்லு பூபதி. இம்பட்டு நாள் கழிச்சு எப்படி ஞாபகம் வந்துச்சு?
சும்மாதான்ல பேசணும்னு தோணுச்சு, தான் கால் பண்ணேன்.
அப்புறம் சொல்லுடே, எப்படி இருக்க?
ஏதோ இருக்கேன், ஒன்றுமே புரியல. திடீர்னு வாழ்க்கை ஒரு அட்டை மாதிரி மாறிடுச்சு.
புரியுதுல, நம்ம எல்லாருக்கும் நம்ம வாழ்க்கையில் ஒரே சூழ்நிலை வரத்தையும் செய்யும். ஆனால் அது இப்படி இருக்கும் அப்படின்னு யாருமே எதிர்பார்க்கல.
தெரியல நண்பா, இப்படியே நடந்துட்டு இருந்தால் எப்படி நிர்வாகம் நடக்கும்? ஒன்றுமே புரியல.
புரியுதுலே, எல்லாருக்கும் இதே விதி தான்.
உனக்கு தான் நல்லாவே தெரியும், வீட்டோட எல்லா பொறுப்பும் என் தலையில் தான் இருக்குது. இதில் இந்த பரவல் நோய் வேற, பொருளாதாரமும் சரிவு.
கேள்விப்பட்டேன்ல உன்னோட வேலையும் கையிலிருந்து போயிடுச்சுன்னு. இல்லை, இதில் அவங்கள குறை சொல்லி என்ன பிரயோஜனம்? அவங்களுக்கும் தொழில் எம்பிட்டு நிர்வாகம் செய்கிறது கஷ்டம். காலத்தின் கட்டாயம், நிறுவனத்தின் செலவு குறிப்பாக செய்யணும்னு அவங்களோட சூழ்நிலை.
நான் ரொம்ப நாளாக சொல்லி தேடிட்டு இருக்கேன். ஒரு மண்ணாங்கட்டி வேலையும் கிடைச்ச மாதிரி இல்லை, சந்தையில் வேலை வாய்ப்பே இல்லை, பங்கு சந்தையிலையும் சரிவு. நகரத்தின் பிழைப்பே கஷ்டமாக இருக்கு. இருந்த காசு எல்லாம் செலவாயிடுச்சு. யாருக்கிட்ட உதவி கேட்க? எல்லாரோட நிலைமை இப்படி தானே இருக்கு. என்னோட எதிர்பார்ப்பெல்லாம் உடஞ்சி போச்சு. என்ன செய்யணும்னு மூளையே வேலை பார்க்க மாட்டேன். ஒன்றுமே புரியல கார்த்திக்.
டேய் டேய் குப்பா, ஹலோ. நீயும் நானும் ஒரே நிலைமையில தான் இருக்கோம். ஆனாலும் நம்ம ரொம்ப அதிர்ஷ்டசாலிங்க. நம்மக்கிட்ட கல்வி இருக்குது, அதை வச்சு எப்படியும் பொழைச்சிக்கிடலாம். அவங்கள கொஞ்சம் நினச்சி பாரு, யாரோட வாழ்க்கை அந்த தினசரி ஊதியத்தை சார்ந்திருக்கு. அந்த தாய், அந்த குழந்தை, அந்த நோயாளி, அம்பிட்டு பேர் ஊரை பார்த்து திரும்ப வந்துட்டுருக்காவியா. அவங்கள நினச்சி பாரு, அவங்ககிட்ட இருக்க வீடு இல்லை, உடுக்க துணி இல்லை, 2 வேளை சாப்பாடு இல்லை, ஆனாலும் போராடிட்டு இருக்காவியா. சுயத்துக்காகவும் தன்னோட குடும்பத்துக்காகவும் போராடிட்டு இருக்காவியா. தைரியத்தை விட்டு கொடுக்கல. அவங்களுக்கு தெரியும் ஒரு நாள் இந்த இருட்டு வெளிச்சமாக மாறும்.
ஆமாம் நண்பா.
பார்ப்புப்பா, நீ முன்னே போய் எதிர்காலத்தில் இந்த நாட்களை நினச்சி பார்ப்ப. அப்போ உனக்கு தோணும், நம்ம இந்த மாதிரி மோசமான நாட்களை வெற்றி கண்டு வந்திருக்கோம்னு.
நல்லாவே பேசுகிறல.
எல்லாமே நம்ம முன்னோர்கள் சொன்ன கதையில் இருந்தேன்.
ரொம்ப நன்றி நண்பா.
நமக்கு நடுவில் எதுக்குள்ள இந்த நன்றி என்றெல்லாம் உனக்கு எப்போ பேசணும்னு தோணுதோ அப்போ எனக்கு ஃபோனை பண்ணு, தாராளமாக ஃபோன் பண்ணு.
கண்டிப்பாக நண்பா.
ஓகேல, பாய்.
Life itself is a prodigy. It can surprise you in the least expected ways. It empties you. It creates self-doubt.
Speculation is growing in India that the 3-week nationwide shutdown due to end tomorrow will be extended.
The world's largest lockdown of 21 days. But a study by Cambridge mathematicians suggests the 3-week restrictions may not be enough to contain the novel coronavirus.
Life can make you feel pain. It can make you feel plain.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah.
Life can haunt you. It can taunt you as well. The lonely, monotonous days can make you lose your ways. But remember, even this moves on.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah.
You will soon start finding the other side. The side that gives you an upward slide. You will see the colors and smile at its powers. You will see the doors open, and there your life moves to reopen. You will see the flowers blooming. You will see the growth ruling.
أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله.
You will feel the union of hearts as this prayer connects together the parts.
It's okay to feel tired, lose that your heart desired. You are the patch of shimmering sky, fighting to be seen through the dark clouds. You are the soft and silver lining, confident, brave, and ever shining. So smile past the darkest night, wake up to a bright sunlight. Liberate your mind, see what you find. Believe me, you will smile again.
Pues ya está. Tú los azules y yo los verdes. Empezamos. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, me comiste. 5. 51. Venga, vuela. Vale, me toca. O te pones las pilas o te voy a ganar, ¿eh? Te toca. Venga, vuela, ¿eh? Que te quedas atrás. 6. Esta la tienes salvada. Me toca. 6. 4. Casi. 3. No, me comiste. A casa. Te cuentas 20. Te metes en casa. Ya estás casi en la meta con eso. Venga, esta la tienes salvada. A ver. Hace buen día. Del 45 al 65. No me intentes timar. Otra en casa. Ya tienes en la meta esa. Te cuentas 10. Con esa no te espero. Abro puente y me cuento 20. Qué suerte, abuela. 5. Venga, abuela, aguanta un poco más, ¿eh? Que ya llegas a la meta. Un 3. Abuela, estás a falta de un 3. Te cojo la mano. ¿Vale? Venga, 1. 2. Has ganado, abuela. Es un 3. Es un 3. Ya estás en la meta.
I hope all of you enjoyed watching these wonderful efforts made by people across the globe in their to show how they have coped with the pandemic and how they are coping with the new normal. Normally, after each short film is screened in any of our festivals, we definitely hear a good round of applause. And since that is missing here, I really feel happy to see all those comments that are coming in the chat box. It would be great if more people can start posting their comments on the films. We now move on to the main part of the festival. So we will have a panel discussion on the film House Owner. House Owner, I'm not sure how many of you in the audience have actually watched the film, but I think it is one of the, it's a wonderful movie that I have watched in recent times. In the history of Frame of Mind, the first Frame of Mind in 2006, it started with the movie Tanmatra. Tanmatra was one of the first movies on dementia that was made in this part of the world, in this part of the country especially. And in the subsequent years, we have seen films like Iris, The Iron Lady. Both of them were biopics from two great personalities from the United Kingdom. And then we had Astu, which was a wonderful film in Marathi by Dr. Mogan Agashe, who is a great friend of SCARF, a renowned psychiatrist from Pune. And that was about a retired professor who goes missing when he has Alzheimer's dementia. And in the last edition of the film festival, we had a very interesting Kannada film, Godibanna Sada Maikatte, which was again, it was a different perspective on dementia. After all this, I was wondering what is going to be new about Lakshmi's film now. I I think it was a completely different take on dementia. I have never seen a movie on dementia that can bring you to the edge of the seat, because it was constantly working in the back of your mind whether what is going to happen next. It sounded more like a suspense thriller. It was a wonderful movie set in the background of the floods of Chennai in 2015. I think most of us would not have forgotten that episode of floods that we faced in 2015. I think the city was reeling from the effects for a very long time. So set in the backdrop of the 2015 floods, this movie talks about your wife who's taking care of her husband, a retired army person who's ailing from Alzheimer's dementia. And what happens in a span of 24 hours is the story. So before we actually go into the panel discussion, I think we can have a few clips from the film just to set the tone. And for those of you who have not watched the film, it will give you an idea what this panel is going to be talking about. Shruti, can we have the clips? Yes, and now I think we will move into the panel discussion and we will understand Alzheimer's dementia through the story of Radha and Vasudevan. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Ms. Lakshmi Ramakrishnan. Lakshmi, can you please switch on your video? Lakshmi, are you able to hear me? So we have on this panel Ms. Lakshmi Ramakrishnan, the director of this film, and it was her voice that we heard all this time. And the other panelists will be Dr. Sridhar Vaidishwaran, old age psychiatrist of SCARF, and Dr. Mitchell Weiss, who is a clinical psychiatrist. He is also a medical anthropologist and a public health professional. And more than anything, he is very important to SCARF as the chairperson of Frame of Mind. He's a transcultural psychiatrist who has excellent knowledge about India, Indian films, and he holds a PhD in Sanskrit as well, besides a PhD in anthropology. So thank you very much, sir, for being here on this panel. Thank you, Sridhar. And we have Mrs. Gomati Radhakrishnan, who is here as a caregiver. She is here to share her personal experiences about caregiving for a person with Alzheimer's dementia. Thank you for joining us. Ms. Lakshmi, are you able to hear me? Okay, while we wait for Lakshmi Ramakrishnan to join us, I think I will start with Mrs. Gomati. What did you find in the clips that you could relate with, Gomati? Can you please switch on your video and mic, please? Unmute yourself.
Hello?
Yeah.
Able to hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the common thing that I found, this was especially the mirror aspect. My mother-in-law, when she was 86, she would look at the mirror and say, who is this lady? The same thing even we experienced here. in the Kazhaviyaaru, she would in fact word it this way, the Kazhaviyaaru. Then we would ask her, what is your age? She would say, I'm just 20 years old. Who is this old lady? That is what she would mean when she said that. And most of the times, she would also sing the old songs, the songs that she had learned when she was a school student. She had studied up to 9th standard, and that itself was a great education during those times. And the songs that she had learned in school, she used to sing whenever we asked her to sing. So that was another aspect of from the movie that I saw. And apart from that, repeating herself, like, just now I had bath, how many times should I have bath? So things like that I could actually relate to when I saw the movie.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Weiss, can you tell me what was your understanding when you saw this film? I mean, is this the same scenario that you find in the West as well?
Well, I thought that the most striking thing about the film was the fact that it contained several storylines all at once. And that's what made it so relevant for screening in Frame of Mind, especially this year. In your introduction, you mentioned so many fine films about dementia that have been made over the years. And this can be included among them as a fine film about dementia. But it was also a film about a striking event. The Chennai floods in 2015 were had such major impact on the city. 500 people died, 1.8 million people displaced, hospitals disrupted, power out. And that was all presented in the film. And of course, in today's world, it's hard not to think of the associations with COVID and the pandemic, which is similarly disrupting people's lives. And so in that sense, I thought that that second storyline made it extremely relevant, even more so than Lakshmi could have imagined when she made it. She didn't know that there would be a pandemic some years later. It took all of us by surprise. And yet, at the same time, what it does is it uses the extreme events to show a much more common problem, just as Gomati was reflecting on experience in the family, and so many of us have associations with people affected by dementia. We recognize that this is a problem independent of disasters. The disaster highlights it, it amplifies it. You wonder, how can this woman care for a man who is so seriously affected? And the vehicle of the disaster helps to make that point. And the third story that I thought that was brought across so well in the film was a love story. You wonder, when you see this woman, you wonder, how can she be so patient? What is it that enables her to rise to the challenge and to take care of this man who is so seriously impaired? And you see that love story of when he was 25 years old and they got married, and that instant falling in love and singing the song that came from the Devanand film, Hum Dono, Abhi Na Jao Chorike. And it makes it brings the coherence to mind of, provides an explanation of the years that went into that relationship that made it possible for her to cope. And I think, perhaps others have some reflection, but I think what the film brings to mind is the question, when we see the film and think about the film, it raises the question about what the problems are. How do we go about coping with this, not only as the individual, but also as the society? How do we deal as a society with dementia? How do we deal with the particular needs of the elderly when they are affected by the kind of disasters that we're living through now and which are so nicely depicted in the film. And how do we think about solutions?
Thank you very much, sir. I think you have beautifully summarized the entire movie and the purpose. Yes, Lakshmi, are you able to hear us now? Please unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining. We were just discussing the other films on dementia that before, and Dr. Mitchell felt that this is a movie that needs to go into that movies that will actually teach dementia to the audience. So thank you for making a wonderful film. Before I come to you, Dr. Sridhar, I think you also were bringing up the same issue that Dr. Weiss was pointing out, how to deal a crisis situation is something that families need to plan for when they are looking at managing persons with dementia. So just for others who would not have understood what was happening in the film, do you think you can explain the clips that we just saw? I mean, does a person with dementia actually look at himself as someone younger? Is it so common that they don't identify themselves when they look into the mirror?
Well, thank you, Dr. Mangala, and thank you very much for kind of organizing this film festival and for the wonderful job of selecting this film. I must congratulate Lakshmi Ramakrishnan for this for making this wonderful film. Yeah, I mean, you've raised a very pertinent point here. It's not only for persons with dementia. I think the question is, how do we think about ourselves? What image do we have of ourselves? And I think we hold on to some happy memories and happy self-images, and we want to be seen in that way. And I think, and that's true for all humans. I think we all do that. And sometimes we forget, we behave in a childish way, or we behave in a way that, that doesn't suit our age, that we don't behave our age at times, and that's normal. Now, that's what people with dementia do too. And usually what happens as one develops dementia is the fact that the way our memories are stored and they are processed and they are organized in a way that when you it's all serially kind of in a temporal way, and we can kind of relate to memories. Oh, what I was doing when I was say a month ago, what did I do a year ago, and things like that. Now, unfortunately, in dementia, and particularly in Alzheimer's disease, the memory that comes in last goes out first. So people generally, the last in, first out is the rule. And when that happens, and when that happens over a period of time, people generally tend to lose memory for events that have happened recently. We can start with what they had for breakfast that day, who they met the previous evening, or what did they do during the last weekend, and things like that. And it can progress over a period of time for them to lose chunks of periods of memory from their lives. And that's what is happening with this gentleman as it's depicted, and that's what we also see in real life. And we then hold on to a memory of ourselves, our circumstances at such a stage where our brain has retained it, and also we choose a happier spot at a level. We choose a happy spot, and we kind of keep to that kind of memory. So that's what happens. That's beautifully depicted in this movie. And it's not just image of ourselves, but also about what's happening around that time. And people sometimes forget that they have been married. People sometimes forget that they have, they have children of their own, or they even have grandchildren of their own, or great-grandchildren, and they just don't have any memory of that. And that can be quite hurtful for the families looking after them. And they may look at the wife, and I think that comes in subsequent scenes in this movie, that he doesn't recognize his wife and asks for who she is. And this is, again, a very common problem that we see in people with dementia. And it can be very hurting for the families. And I've had people breaking down in my clinic saying that I've been with this man, or I've been with this woman for so many years. I've done so much for him or her. I love him or her so much. And then see what's happening. He doesn't or she doesn't even recognize me now. What is the point in all this? And that can be quite devastating for the caregiver to experience. But what is important also to notice is that even if he forgets, I think he gets brownie points for not allowing another woman to sleep with him. He's not happy to have another woman lying next to him. I mean, those are the kind of things. Sometimes, I mean, I've had experience of people harming their spouse. I've had one experience of, not here in the UK, where an elderly lady actually took a knife to her husband who was sleeping next to her, and she didn't recognize him, and she was only trying to protect herself, and that led to a lot of issues subsequently. But I mean, those are the kind of problems we see when people react and behave in a way. But that's an issue. Now, moving on to the next pertinent point that you raised about disasters. I think we are living in a world we are going to see disasters. This is not the first one, and this is definitely not the last disaster that they're going to see. And I think in these two disasters that we have seen, my experience working with people with dementia, one thing that I have learned is that when we develop a clinical management plan for someone with dementia, and for that matter, I would say for all medical conditions, chronic medical conditions, I would suggest that we make a disaster management plan that's specifically tailored for that person. And maybe that's something which we can come back to and discuss at a later point in time.
Yeah. Thank you, Sridhar. Lakshmi ma'am, I think you must have heard Dr. Weiss saying that there was not just one story, 3 stories in that one film that he was able to see.
Oh, I didn't hear him. I couldn't hear him.
He was talking about the story of the caregiving. There is a love story and a story about the Chennai floods, right? Okay. So I want to ask you, when I think we met before you started this film, you said that you were planning on making a film soon after the 2015 floods. So why did you choose this particular story to show the Chennai floods?
Yeah, because my sister lived in Defense Colony, and most of her neighbors are all senior citizens, you know. What I noticed was, if not to this level, most of them are almost in a age group where they have different percentage of the same, you know, issue with them. Like it is only differing in the, you know, where they are actually in the graph. So all these people went through real tough time during the floods, and what came out was the way the caregivers, you know, were tending to the elderly, and then you know, that survival spirit, and the way they, you know, put up with the crisis, all that really touched me. And this was first-hand narration from my sister. Okay. You know, so when I heard that story, I thought I should share it with others. And what actually impressed me so much was my brother-in-law. He knows that he's forgetting things. If you go and ask him something, he will somehow manage. He will not tell us that he doesn't remember. He will ask us. If I go and ask him, who am I? He'll say, you tell me, who are you? He'll tell me, you know, like he will try to bring it out from, and he will never give up. Okay. Being an army man, being an ex-service man, he has so much of pride in him. So at many places, I would have, you know, shown that aspect of that character. And also, when he gets a chocolate, he loves chocolates, he loves sweets. The first thing he would do is he'd break it into half and give it to my sister. He doesn't know who she is, but he feels very secure. He gets a feeling of, you know, like there's a motherly thing about her, like he feels very secure with her. You know, when she's not around, he doesn't know that actually Akka is not around, but then he's restless, he's insecure. So all these things, you know, like, and he's been traveling a lot. He has fought 2 wars, both the wars he has fought for our country. and a very broad-minded person. But once he got into this plane, he became very insecure. In the sense, he used to show his that male chauvinistic part would come out. It's because I think there is a scene where who are you to tell me? This is my house. That possessiveness, that thing that I'm the boss of the house, that used to come out. Actually, that is not his usual self. It is that insecurity which makes him feel, I'm the boss. So all these things, I thought there's a lot of nuances inside that, and that one crisis, one floods, which which brought out a lot of these things. 33 hours alone with no help. When she narrated that whole, it was ups and downs, like it was living a whole life together in that 33 hours. That is the film about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely agree with what you said. Actually, after watching the film, I was feeling the floor below me wet. I felt really wet. It was so much of water all over the place. And that point you raised about the male chauvinistic expression. Yes, I thought that was another layer to that film. It was just a reflection of the position of women in our social setup. Any day you can't call the shots, though you can have authority about being the boss moment, but you still can't call the shots in the house. That was brought out very effectively in that film. Sridhar, I want to ask you, are people like Radha for real, or is it an exaggerated screen portrayal?
Oh, absolutely not. It's not at all exaggerated. They're very real. And I've also seen a lot of male caregivers looking after
Sridhar, I think you need to be a little louder, please.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was saying that it's not exaggerated at all. And also, as Dr. V said earlier on about how can such a person exist? It's a question you sometimes ask when you look at a caregiver, showing so much of love and affection to a person with dementia. I have so many examples of both men and women being caregivers, looking after their loved ones, of wives looking after their husbands with dementia, husbands looking after their wives with dementia, sons, daughters-in-laws looking after dementia. And of course, in our society, most of the care is provided by women, and particularly in an Indian setting, a majority of the caregiving, the role and responsibility of providing care is kind of held by women. There's no doubt about that. If it's a man who has dementia, it's usually his wife or his daughter-in-law. If it's a woman who has dementia, if there are husbands around, yes, they do. But as you know, given the life expectancy of women in general, and again, the lifestyle factors come into play, and many women who live into that age are widows. And then their daughters-in-law or their daughters are the main caregivers, even though son is there in the picture, but it's a daughter-in-law who actually provides most of the care. And that's the kind of general picture we see. And it's amazing to see some of the kind of stories and all this. I mean, whatever is depicted in this movie, as Radha is going through the daily fluctuations, while at one point there is so much of love pouring forth from the other side, and then suddenly it changes into fit of rage and anger, and that's something which they experience in a day-to-day basis. I'm sure Gomati, Mrs. Gomati can talk about that in more detail.
Ask Gomati. Gomati, I think in this film, Radha being the wife, there is so much of love between the couple. So maybe that caregiving was a little more easier. How was it with your mother-in-law? You have to unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah.
As doctor spoke about Radha, I wish I were a Radha. I have had a lot of bouts of this inadequacy, sort of feeling inadequate all the time. And most of the time, even we have felt guilty as a caregiver, because from a 60 kg, she came to 30 kg in a span of about about 5-6 years. From a 60 kg, she came to 30 kg, and people around, when they look at her, people, relatives who come home, look at her and say, "Sapad podre, are you giving her food? Are you by any chance giving her food? Why has she become so thin?" So when we see all of that, people commenting and her not able to recognize her own son, as she progressed into dementia, Alzheimer's, and we were like full of ridden with guilt. Oh my God, what is it that is happening, and why am I not able to? Why am I feeling so desperate? Always inadequate and guilty. I'm not doing enough. That feeling, we as a family, we used to get, in spite of doing whatever we could. We always had this feeling of being inadequate, and a sense of helplessness, hopelessness, maybe even scary sometimes. The occasion when she went to the kitchen and tried to drink away the phenyl bottle, which was white in color, like the liquid inside it was white, thinking it is milk. To our luck, I just happened to see her, take that bottle and trying to drink, and immediately stopped her. So it was becoming very scary and dangerous. We had to monitor her all the time, like how we monitor a small child. We had to, the phases of her deterioration was such that we had to face new things every time. For example, at one point in time when she asked me, looking at my husband, that is her own son, she said, "Can you look at him as an alliance for me? That boy looks quite good." I said, oh, okay, so what is your age? So she said, "I am just 18 years old. So that boy looks quite good. Can you just speak up for, on my behalf? Can you look for him? We cannot even discuss such things outside, even amongst our close family people. We, how many people can we explain, and how many of them will understand? See, given a chance, even I would have not understood any of this, but for the fact that I was a caregiver, and we were able to see what happening to our loved one, that is my mother-in-law. So otherwise, it was so challenging for all of us to met out, in the daily routine itself. So like, she would have a cup of coffee, immediately the next moment she will forget and come again for a cup of coffee. By and large, earlier than the Alzheimer's, she used to be an extremely disciplined person, especially in her eating habits. So when we found all these changes happening initially and all, we did not read much into her issues, because we were coping up. Okay, food only, and I was also working. So it's okay, let her have food. She's hungry, and we had just lost her father-in-law. So maybe that is bothering her, and she's not able to cope up with that aspect of losing her husband. And then, but later on, when we got to know that one day she became extremely violent. Like, she was such a polite and kind-hearted person. Normal circumstances, but one day she would just open the door in the middle of the night. She will say, "Open the door, I have to go and see my father-in-law, I have to give him coffee." I said, "What is happening?" And then that is when actually we sought medical advice. So till that time, we had not read much into the initial stages of her Alzheimer's, because we thought probably she's very disturbed. And that also, we had a guilt feeling, probably we could have gone for an early diagnosis. So that also was a learning, that was an experience.
Yeah, thank you, Gomati. Sridhar, if you remember, I was having a patient with you. The doctor brought her mother for consultation with just one complaint. For the past 3 days, she has been cooking the same and the same vegetable on 3 consecutive days, and the daughter felt that something was amiss, and she decided to seek consultation. But then, even then, you took her into your team, and after investigations, you said it was definitely a fairly advanced case of Alzheimer's. So, how early can people diagnose? So, when should they actually seek help? Because this, many a time, like she said, no, everybody feels that they could have done something if it was identified early. So can you tell us how people can pick up early symptoms of Alzheimer's?
Thank you, Dr. Mangala. That's a very, very important question. And what is happening in many countries, and particularly in India, is people are confused about normal aging and dementia. And even symptoms of, obvious symptoms of dementia are missed as the normal feature of aging. Generally, people say, oh, you just get forgetful when you age, and this is just part of normal aging. And that's something which many people kind of have as a notion. Now, that needs to change. Now, I would say if you find anything that's different in the person from their previous lifestyle, if anything is different, please seek immediate medical help. It need not be memory. It could be a change in their personality. It could be change in their routines, change in their preferences for types of food, what they generally do. If it's something that you see it's persistent and it's been happening for some for a period of time, I would definitely advise that you go and seek immediate medical help. There's no harm in getting one tested and getting the right advice at the early stage. The reason being, if you identify dementia early, there is so much you can do to, one, reduce or decrease the rate of deterioration. That's something which we can definitely do. Second thing we can do is, often in a person with dementia, there are other associated medical problems, which are often, again, not picked up, not diagnosed. So someone may have diabetes, someone may have hypertension, heart disease, all these. I mean, I've seen so many people with severe anemia, and it's not been picked at all. And they come for an assessment for their memory or for their behavior, and then you identify dementia, and you also incidentally pick up severe anemia. And anemia often worsens their cognitive functions, worsens their memory and their behavior. And you find that this is something, if you correct it, you can actually do, they function at a better level, their behavior improves, their sleep improves, and these kind of things you will see in a big way in a person with dementia. So my advice is, if you see a change in the person, I would advise you to seek immediate help. And if you feel that the person is forgetful, if they themselves report that I'm forgetting, or if others notice that the person is being forgetful, repeating themselves, doing things that they're doing again repeatedly, definitely go for medical help. The other problems you may notice are word finding difficulties in communicating. They are having kind of problems with reading or writing or doing simple calculations, mental arithmetic. Again, this is a common problem people say, is that they keep paying their watchmen, their maid, their bills repeatedly, and that sometimes is often an early sign. The other important changes is the routines that they have been doing in their homes, like cooking, like simple things like having a bath, and they're a bit confused right now. They don't know where the bathroom is, or they go to the bathroom and you find that they haven't actually had a shower, and they're just coming out with the same clothes that they were wearing before, or they are kind of quite confused about where the toilet is. I mean, these are the symptoms that you will see in fairly advanced dementia, but unfortunately, even those signs are missed by many families. So that's something which, if you're able to see any of these, please seek immediate medical help.
There was a question in the chat box, and I think you have already answered that question about what to do when we identify the early symptoms. Dr. Weiss, can you tell me how different it is in the West in help seeking? People there tend to live more alone or more independent than the elderly people in the Indian population. So do they identify problems earlier, or is it much later?
Well, I think that many of the points that Dr. Sridhar mentioned would apply in the West also. The question of elderly people more likely to be living on their own, this is something that's frequently mentioned in the comparisons between India and the West. And perhaps there is something to that, but I think that the general principles that are illustrated here apply very similarly in the West.
Okay. Sridhar, there was in one part of this movie, she's talking on the phone with her father, and then she's mentioning that the milk has not come yet, and he immediately starts panicking and saying, how will I have my coffee? So how good or how bad is it to give them bad news?
That's $1 million question. It is important to give people with dementia news. There's no point, I mean, they don't live in a vacuum, and it's very important they are included in day-to-day discussions and businesses, because there's no need to isolate them. But at the same time, you need to be careful about what they're exposed to. I mean, the other important thing you'll notice in this film is the TV is constantly on the run, and there is constant exposure to the news about how people have, and how much flooding is happening, how many people have died and all that. And there's one scene where he goes on his way to have a bath, and then he suddenly stops in front of the TV and he hears the news reporter saying that there are 2 people who have died in Velachery due to the floods. And then he says, oh, what happened? And there's a genuine concern in his face, and he is worried about that. And that's something which we can potentially avoid, is how we give this information sensitively to someone with dementia. The other problem we have sometimes in dementia is, I mean, coming to the issue of having a TV as an information source, it's potentially a problem, because often as dementia advances, and I'm sure many of Gomati and other caregivers here would have an experience of this, people can't differentiate what's real and what's actually on the TV. And they may actually assume that things happening in the TV are happening in real life in their living room, and they get very distressed by that. So again, I would advise against having a TV on all the time. So that's again a source of information, but that needs to be filtered quite carefully. So you need to give them information about floods, but in a sensitive way.
Okay. We have a couple of questions here. Can we predict risk for dementia by tests like MRI? Or can we do the test when one is 60 plus?
Right. MRI is not useful as a test for predicting dementia. It doesn't. It shouldn't be used as a test for predicting dementia at all. Dementia remains a clinical diagnosis as of today. And of course, there are lots of advances happening as we speak regarding diagnosis in dementia, and particularly Alzheimer's disease. I mean, Alzheimer's disease is just one type of dementia, even though it's the most common. About 60 to 65% of all dementias is Alzheimer's, but the rest, 40-45% are other types of dementia. So there are lots of diagnostic tests which are coming in the market, in the pipeline, but not available for clinical use. There are tests, there are some specific scans which are available, which can potentially help us to pick up Alzheimer's disease, not dementia. Alzheimer's disease is a process which usually starts in our 40s, but then it converts to dementia much later when we are older. So we may be able to identify that someone may have Alzheimer's disease early on by using some of these sophisticated scans, which as of yet are not available in India for clinical use. They're available only in research centers, and they are available in the US and in some other Western countries, but currently not available in India. So using a diagnostic test is not something which I would advise at this point in time. But what I would advise is to look after one's health. If you have any medical illnesses, particularly hypertension, now if there is one disease that I would say people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, that they should definitely address is hypertension. If you have high blood pressure, please take treatment for that, because that's the only drug that has known evidence, there's enough evidence to show that giving antihypertensives actually prevents dementia. We don't have that level of evidence for other medical problems. So that can definitely prevent dementia.
Yes. Okay. So there's another question about, do youngsters also get affected by dementia?
Youngsters do get affected by dementia if they are a caregiver. Yeah. Dementia affects everyone. It's everyone's business. Okay. Yeah. But if you are a person, and the risk of developing dementia when you're less than 60 is less than 1%. And if you're less than 40, it's less than 0.25%. So it's extremely rare in younger age, but it increases to more than 5% above the age of 65. And as we get older, the risk multiplies.
Yes. Okay. Dr. Vaid, I'd like to hear from you. What is the social support system that is available for people in your country, which we can think of adapting in our system?
Yeah. Well, I live in Switzerland, and there are homes for elderly and there are institutional supports, but there are also family supports. I'm not sure that there is a ready solution that I could suggest that would go from here to there. But actually, I think one of the points that the film made for me, and which Dr. Sridhar touched on earlier, was that idea of having a disaster plan in mind, to be thinking in advance of what to do. And actually, in making this film, it was more than a film just about dementia. It was a film about dementia in the times of serious disaster and how to deal with that. And I guess at the time of the disaster, just like now, we hear so much about the way the migrant worker crisis has been dealt with or not adequately dealt with. The same thing came up after 2015 in Chennai, the question of, was the government adequately prepared? Were the drainage systems in the shape that they should have been in order to prevent this kind of thing? So there's, in addition to the clinical dimension, which many of the questions have focused on, and our discussion has focused on, there are also a number of societal questions that we need to be asking. I think even after the 2015 floods, the political party ADMK lost power in the elections that followed. But many of the questions that are raised in the time of disaster often get forgotten soon earlier or soon after. And I think that question remains now about what will happen after COVID, and whether these questions and the priority of a disaster management plan, whether that will remain afterwards. And these are things not only for India, but also for the West, and it's a globally shared issue.
Gomati, before I move on to Lakshmi, I would like to ask you, what was the support system that was in place for you when you had to take care of your mother-in-law, other than the immediate family?
Yeah, other than the immediate family, luckily we came across DemCares who had actually printed, there was an article in the paper when I was looking out for support, external support, and that came as a blessing, headed by Dr. Sridhar. And we would meet, all caregivers, we would meet every month, at Anna Salai branch of DemCares. And we would, cry our heart out, that release of our emotions itself was a very cathartic experience, in the sense like we got the feeling that we are not alone in all of this. Like, we have other caregivers who have got similar issues like us, who are struggling with caregiving for their loved ones. And as we shared each one's experience, and we were like becoming more and more confident, especially by the fact that we are not alone. We could share in this particular group, which was very non-judgmental, and confidentiality would be maintained. And we would just open our heart out, and we would talk and talk and talk till we got some solace. We want solace. We will find our own solution. Of course, every patient is a different patient, because the needs are never the same for every caregiver. They are all different, and behaviors are different. Even the needs are different, the wants are different for every family. But then as caregivers, we had one common bonding, in the sense we were all there for each other. And we started learning more about how to give care for a patient with dementia, especially within the four walls of the house. How can we make them even more comfortable? What to do, the do's, the don'ts. For example, when my mother-in-law, she developed incontinence, and she was mobile also. Although she was 80 plus, she was mobile. So, and when she developed incontinence, we had to put her on diaper, and she would remove the diaper. Every time you would put it on, she would remove it, because she could remove it, and she will keep it under the pillow, thinking, I do not know what she would think of it. But then from the support group, I got the idea, and that was the greatest idea I got. Like, you can buy a pinafore style of dress, and that I got from the West Side departmental store, wherein, it is secured by 2 bells and it is secured behind, so that she cannot remove the pinafore. So her diaper is in place. So such ideas, an idea can come from any quarter. So as caregivers, we shared ideas, and that is how we empowered each other, like, what to do, what not to do, what helps, what doesn't help. So such things really mattered a lot to us, and that is how, we empowered ourselves.
So staying connected helped.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. There are a couple of interesting questions that have come up on the chat box. Is it possible for someone to understand or recognize by themselves when their pattern or behavior changes?
Is it to me?
Dr. Sridhar, any one of you can.
Is it possible to recognize oneself whether they have dementia? Is that the question?
Is it possible for someone to understand by themselves that their pattern or behavior has changed?
That's a very complex question.
Yeah.
I wish there was an easy answer to that. Yes and no would be my answer. It depends. Not all persons with dementia lack insight, and it's very important to remember that. And in fact, some of our patients, they identified a problem themselves and they have sought help right at the beginning, or they may not know where to go for help. And that's another problem that we have, is that there are not enough, they don't know, there's not enough awareness about what to do when you have a problem. And that's another important issue that we need to address. So the first thing is there a problem? And two, if there is a problem, who should I go to for help? I mean, if we are able to make these two things clear, I think it will be helpful. So if you have a problem, how do you know if you have a problem? If you find there's a change in your routine, if you're not doing anything that you were doing before, if you're not able to do some of the things that was quite easy for you before, then it might indicate a problem. If you have a problem, who should you go to? You can go to any medical practitioner, a general medical practitioner, a geriatrician, a neurologist, a psychiatrist. Please see any of them and tell them your real concern.
Okay.
I have a question. I have a question for Lakshmi, if that's okay.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I thought you had in the clip that was shown that people could see, even if they haven't seen the film yet, there was a very touching way in which you introduced the characters. You started out with the 25-year-old version, and it was the interaction with the mirror and coming in through the mirror that we were introduced to the elderly man with dementia. And on that mirror, we noticed that it had a covering on it, so that it wasn't just a one-time issue. It was something that had come up earlier, and Radha very sensitively pulled down the covering because she knew it was disturbing. I was wondering how you came to think about that, and
that was exactly my next question to Lakshmi as well. I mean, what was your homework and planning for making this film, Lakshmi? Because I think it is very important for other filmmakers to know, like, how much effort needs to go into making a film on such a sensitive issue. Yeah, please go ahead.
I'm very conscious about this, that it has to be close to reality and it shouldn't mislead. It shouldn't give the wrong message. So I want it to be as correct as possible. Though the perfection is not, it's never done that way. So I tried to make it as close to reality as possible. And I spoke to a lot of people who have, like Sri Ranjini, who played the Radha character. Her mother-in-law is a dementia patient and she's a caregiver. So I could get a lot of information from her while scripting itself. Then I met a lot of doctors, and I think I spoke to you also about this. Yeah. So I would collect information, and my greatest source of information was my sister. And I have seen her. I haven't seen last 7 years. She was in Defence Colony. Now they've moved to Bangalore. And so day in and day out, every day I speak to her. So I know the day-to-day activities. So there was one fine day, one morning when he walked into the bathroom and he started talking to the mirror. That's when my sister told me that this happened today. And then next time when I went home, she had removed the mirrors from all the toilets, there were no mirrors. So a few days she tried putting this, cover. She would put a cloth, or sometimes it flies off. So I wanted that scene to be very dramatic, where I introduced the character. So it connected. I think when you script, it's a very subconscious process. It is not that I was conscious about all this information. It is just that I had collected all these information. It was already there in the back of the mind. Yes. And what was intriguing was that his original character, which was so impressive, like being an ex-serviceman. That thing came out at many places. So all these things actually fascinated me a lot, which made me make this film. It was not out of sympathy, or it was not out of that feeling of, seeing her suffer. No, there was more of a fascination, because the way she handles him, the way they interact, sometimes you feel there is so much of, when you see children, you have that feeling, they are so genuine. There is no hypocrisy there. Yes. It was like that. So it was very fascinating for me. So Dr. Weiss, that particular scene, many people told me that people wouldn't understand. Don't take out that scene, because that's like, it looks like a, art film and all that stuff. But I was very sure that my character has to be introduced this way. Mirrors are always fascinating for me. Even for me, it's very fascinating. When Dr. Sridhar said, you look at the mirror, it's not just for patients of dementia, even for us, it's a very fascinating thing, the image we have about ourselves and then what we see in the mirror, most of the time it's so different. So that fascination was there. So it fitted so well for me, like in that particular scene, the introduction scene. And so this songs, I wanted to ask Dr. Sridhar and all of you, he seems to remember all the old songs. He doesn't even forget a single word. How come? That is something which is amazing. He remembers all the songs.
It was really just the one song.
That is attached to the
one song. It was the one song that he kept repeating.
Pardon, doctor, I couldn't get you.
He was repeating from
Abhinaj Jao Thodkar. Yes.
And it was mainly that song, and she asked him to sing something new, and he always kept coming back to that same song. Hum Dono.
Dr. Weiss, I think you have seen that film.
Yes, Hum Dono.
Okay. Yeah.
It was 1961, Dev Anand.
Okay. So with my brother-in-law, we go through this. So he has some favorite songs. And he keeps repeating it. But we unless it is 4 or 5 times, then then we say, okay, we try to divert his attention. Otherwise, he keeps singing the same song because he loves those songs. One more thing I have noticed, doctor. Now it's almost 10 years, and since they moved to Bangalore, it is I would say 2 to 3 years. There is no deterioration now. And he's managing quite well. They're able to, when Akka tells me that, she's finding it more difficult to get him to have a bath, and then, but then that he's a happy man now. When I saw him recently, I found that he's very happy. In between, when I met him, he was a little, agitated and irritable and all that. But now I don't see him that way. Last time when I saw him, so probably because he started drawing, he started painting, and his daughter stays upstairs. So they're able to give a lot of quality time. My sister is 16 years older to me. So you can imagine it's quite tough on her also. So now since their daughter is also there to take care, and they have a full-time person who is, attending to him, I think that happy atmosphere is helping him a lot. It's not. I find him in a better, in better spirits. Yeah. So there are a lot of things I wanted to show, doctor, but that it's not enough. Like there is so much every day. There is a new development, and I wish the film ended in a positive manner.
Yes.
But then that will be very idealistic. So
no, it left us haunted. I mean, it felt really heavy for a couple of days after watching the film. Sridhar, I think just taking on from the same point, you usually say, when there is a lot of emotion attached to a particular thing or a thought, the memory stays on for a little longer, which is probably why this man is able to come back, find his way back home, even when he goes missing for a short period. Actually, there is a question in the chat box which is asking, do patients feel the distress that they can't recognize family members?
They do. I think, of course, that's something which is often missed, and we see that as behavior change in a person with dementia. You see in this movie, there are lots of instances where he starts shouting, where he starts behaving in an aggressive manner. And it's just it's the distress that he is experiencing, which is actually acted out in a behavior way, and that we see in many persons with dementia. Now, as you say, it's quite common experience that people remember certain things, and I've had many caregivers coming and telling me, is he or she really having dementia? Are they acting? How are they able to remember something that happened 20, 30 years ago, and they're not able to remember they have what they did yesterday? And that's a very common question. One, there are two reasons for that. One, they have old memories intact. It's more recent memories which are often lost in early stages of memory, dementia. So while they may remember Dev Anand movies or Sanjeev Kumar songs from 30, 40 years ago, they will not have any memory of A.R. Rahman songs from last 10, 15 years. So that, of course, with our generation, it might change. And I may remember more of A.R. Rahman than maybe I don't know who is going to come next. So that's going to happen. So that's a generational thing. The two is our emotion-laden memories are stored separately. The processes are different to normal day-to-day mundane stuff. So what I had for breakfast is not very important. But if I liked a particular breakfast, the first breakfast I had with my wife, or the first cup of coffee that I had with my girlfriend, man, I'll remember that. I mean, it's kind of stuck in my head. So certain positive memories and also unpleasant memories. If someone has been very harsh to me or has been, it's been a very difficult time, I may retain those memories for a longer period of time than otherwise. So that kind of mismatch is something we sometimes see. It fits with how our brain works and how our brain processes memories and things like that.
There's another question about how loneliness can affect or worsen symptoms of dementia.
Social isolation and loneliness plays a very important part in worsening dementia. And as you said, being connected is not only important for all of us, particularly more important for those with dementia. And I think, Mrs. Lakshmi, when you said your brother-in-law is better when he is in Bangalore, I think an important reason is probably because he is with his family, with his daughter, and having a family around definitely helps. But having a family doesn't automatically translate to improved socialization. And many elderly still live with their families, but are isolated within those families. They're not included in discussions. They're not included in conversation and things like that. So having people around numerically is one, but actually having people around and also including them in conversation is very important. I think this pandemic and the lockdown has definitely taught us that, and being connected with each other is extremely important. And using any means of communication, it can be a telephone, it can be a video call, and I think we are all more aware of it. We are becoming more experts at it nowadays, connecting through video calls and things like that. But we kind of, our experience has been through the pandemic that families which have adapted to using technology, which have used ways to communicate with one another, have actually managed relatively better than those which couldn't. I think that's quite important to remember.
Sridhar, I think we are all aware with increasing lifespan, we are likely to have more patients with dementia. And right now, our statistics says that at least we have, it is about 35% if you are above 85 years of age, the risk of dementia. So and India being the third, having the third highest number of persons with Alzheimer's across the globe, there is an increasing need for institutional facilities as well, because I think not everyone will be able to afford looking after a person with dementia. The economic burden becomes much higher. So being in an institution, I think a lot of families go through guilt about putting their loved ones in an institutional facility. So can you tell how beneficial it will be for someone to be in an institution? I think many a time it will help them better than being all alone at home. And can you give us a brief update about what is the status of our DemCare Center at Tambram?
Thank you. I think the key word here is help. What kind of help does the person with dementia need? At an early stage, depending on the need of the person with dementia, the help can be provided at home. It can be provided by the family. It can be provided by additional domiciliary help. You can have a helper to come and help with day-to-day stuff. But as the illness advances, and depending on the circumstances at home, if the caregiver is working, if the caregiver is ill, then they will not be able to provide the level of support that the person with dementia needs. And if such is the case, then the person definitely will benefit from being in an institutional care. Now, again, there are lots of ways of providing this institutional care, depending on how the needs are and what the needs are and how severe they are and things like that. And of course, in India, we don't have such sophisticated levels of institutional facilities compared to other developed economies. So for example, in the UK where I worked before, we have supported accommodation to begin with. That's probably you have, there are such facilities coming up, retirement homes, so-called retirement homes. So you can have your own flat, and then you have somebody coming and help, they can either bring you your food to your home, or you go to a dining room and have your food. And as the illness progresses, then they are not capable of living by themselves. They're not able to manage their own household. Then they may move into a facility which has more care that's being provided for the person. So they may need reminders to go and have a bath, or they may need reminders to use the toilet and things like that, which means that they need to be more professionals who are around to help the person with dementia. And sometimes when you have someone with dementia who has a behavioral change, they may have people with dementia, almost 80% of them during the course of their illness have one behavioral problem or the other. They may start having problems with their sleep. They may have problems with their anxiety. They may feel depressed, or sometimes they may hear voices. They may see things which are not there, which can be quite scary and distressing for them. To address them, yes, we need medical help, but also they need proper nursing care, which often can only be provided in a fully equipped institution. And that's the right thing for the person at that stage in life. I'll give you an analogy. Say someone has appendicitis. You wouldn't operate the person in your kitchen or on your dining table. Okay, you would take them to a hospital. Similarly, when someone has advanced dementia, they need the kind of help that they need. You can't simply provide that in your home. It's actually you're doing more harm to the person with dementia, and you're also harming yourself in the process as a caregiver. So it's very important to let go of this guilt. It's only taking the right help that's available. If help is available and if it can be afforded by the family, I think that's one key point here is affordability. Dementia care costs, because it's not easy to appoint someone to look after someone with dementia. It costs. And that becomes a problem sometimes for many families to afford care for the person with dementia. So if there are means to provide care, and if there are facilities available, then I would advise you use the right kind of help. I wouldn't say someone with an early dementia should be institutionalized immediately. Okay. Depending on the needs, the decision has to be made. Now, regarding our center in Tambram, the construction work is almost done. And we are waiting on some clearances from the relevant authorities to kind of have the facility operational. And next stage will be to recruit staff, train them, and then have our facility open. We hope that by mid 2021, we should have the facility open and available.
Thank you. Lakshmi, there are comments in the chat box asking you to make more movies like this.
Okay.
I think we will have a day when we can have a film festival with your movies alone. You know, we always had that feeling about Mohanlal's movies. He has made movies on almost all mental health conditions, from alcoholism to Alzheimer's. He has done everything. So I think you have Arohanam Amini, which talks about aging gracefully, and then now on dementia. Maybe with the next few films, we will organize a festival with your films alone.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have tried increase.
Thank you. One question I have to the doctors. So the main character who played Vasudevan's character, I want to know your opinion about his performance, because I wanted him to be very, very subtle. Because when we see movies, always mental disorders or disturbances are portrayed in a very exaggerated manner. So with this character, I wanted to be very, very subtle. So there was an understanding between me and the actors and I. I said, be as natural as possible. Don't be exaggerated, be as subtle. And I think he lived the character. So I had given him some videos of my, with my sister's permission. And of course, I can't take the permission of my brother-in-law. I still feel guilty about it. But I showed him some video clippings, and that's how I thought he imbibed it so well that I couldn't make out. At one point of a time, I thought it was my character there on the screen. It was not Kishore. That good he was. But in the conventional sense, especially in Tamil industry, it was not considered, or he was not awarded for his performance. But I personally, as a director, I felt he was extraordinary. I would like to know from doctors, like you see patients like this and people with the same condition. So how was his performance? Was it depicted well? I wanted to know your opinion.
Well, if he had come to my clinic,
I will go first. I think he was wonderful. It was, as you said, it was a very, very realistic movie, and there was not an iota of exaggeration in Kishore's performance. And he was the army man that he believed he was throughout the film. And that was brought out very well in his body language. And I think, yes, it is very sad that that acting was not recognized. It is very sad, yes.
I think Dr. Sridhar was saying something.
Yeah, I was saying, if he were to come to my, if it was my clinic, and if I saw him, I would have diagnosed him as dementia. So it was quite good.
I would be so happy. Actually, I felt really bad. Both of them were not awarded for their performances. Dr. Weiss, I would like to know your...
I agree. I think the performances were excellent and very realistic. They really evoked exactly what they needed to. The question that I would have for Dr. Sridhar is, were we at that level in what we saw with him? Would you recommend institutionalization at that point? I think you raised some important points about the cost of institutional care and is it really accessible? And again, that's a global issue, the high cost of institutional care. But one of the things that came across there was how extraordinary it was that she was able to cope with him and do as well, that Radha was able to do as well as she was doing. And I'm curious what your recommendation might be if you were to see someone at that level of...
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't recommend institutionalization for this gentleman. He was actually getting help at home. There was a helper who was around, but he couldn't come on the day because of the floods. For a gentleman at that level of severity of dementia, I would recommend having help at home and also attending day centers day centers play a very important role in one, giving a routine for the person with dementia, and also provides an opportunity for cognitive stimulation and socialization. I think they are extremely important for someone with dementia. So I would recommend a day center for this gentleman, and which is filled with activities through the day, gives an opportunity for meeting other people and interacting with them and all that, and having help at home to help with things like bathing, for example, or doing some puzzles together, or playing a game of carom board at home. Of course, the wife can do that whenever she can, but also having help at home will kind of greatly aid the caregiver in her day-to-day responsibilities. So that would be my recommendation for this level of severity. Of course, you will see when the recommendation depends not just on the severity of dementia, but also on the social circumstances. If the wife is not around, if there is no wife to look after him, then it becomes a different problem. Then maybe he would need an institutional care at an earlier stage than what should be done for him with his wife being around, with a caregiver being around. So I think having a family member around or having a caregiver around definitely helps in the process. But for the level of severity that he has, institutional care is probably not needed.
That may answer your question, that it was so easy to, from his performance, to think of him as a patient and to engage with it in a clinical way. That's a tribute to how well he did it.
Okay. So I will, yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
I would definitely convey this to both of them. They'll feel so happy.
Yeah, and I think your voice suited Sriranjani so well. It was that actually added weight to the character's distress. Yeah. So I think we have come to the end of the session now. So just to summarize, Alzheimer's dementia is a growing problem in a country like India, where we are standing third in the world in the number of cases, and diagnosing it early will help a long way in curtailing the progression of the illness. If not, there was a comment in the chat box saying that there is no cure. Yes, there is no cure as yet, but then definitely progression of the illness can be slowed down, like how Lakshmi was narrating about her brother-in-law being better with better rehab facilities in Bangalore. So identifying early finally remains the key, and taking care of metabolic conditions like hypertension or diabetes, and having a good lifestyle, having regular walking, regular exercising, and good dietary habits, and staying connected. Actually, there was a question on whether playing brain games will help. Definitely it will help in old age. People have to be cerebrally active, not just physically active, but cerebrally active as well. Doing small puzzles or playing the Sudoku or some games on the phone definitely helps if you don't get addicted. So with all that, I think we have to accept the fact that once the disease progresses, it is going to be a very difficult situation, both for the patient and the family, and it is okay to ask for help. The caregiver has to be willing to and accept the fact that more help is needed and what they are providing is not adequate, and must accept institutional care, which means we need to look at development of the infrastructure that is needed for taking care of all these people as the years move on. So thank you very much for joining us, and please be back with us tomorrow for a very heated debate with again Dr. Lakshmi in the panel. We are going to discuss about how mental health professionals have been projected in recent cinema in the regional languages. So it is going to be a bit of a heated argument.